You're overwrought, madam. I've opened a window for you. A little air will do you good. Why don't you go? Why don't you leave Manderley? He doesn't need you. He's got his memories. He doesn't love you. He wants to be alone again with her. You've nothing to stay for. You've nothing to live for, really, have you? Look down there. It's easy, isn't it? Why don't you? Why don't you? Go on.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 251 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and as always joined by my fellow co-hosts Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
That was very sexy.
Was that meant to be Elvis or Hitchcock? I'm not sure.
But we're the Elvis podcast now.
I think I was going for Hitchcock, but it might have come out of it.
Elvis.
It did. All right then. Oh,
That's right.
Well,
That's descending into Elvis now.
Elvis made films, and this is a film.
Yes.
So,
Fun fact.
Yes.
That's fun facts.
yeah. To be fair, we did prepare by mentioning Elvis because we were talking about the Dirty Song channel, Sus Records, on YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to say, we were chatting about Elvis and
Yeah,
multi-song lyrics that he
I
made.
don't know if it's AI or people do record these, but it's basically songs in the style of an era, but with really dirty lyrics and song titles.
Yeah, check out Sus Records. It's hilarious.
Sus Records. It's really funny, and it will point you to a load of other ones as well.
So what's it called?
So if you fancy hearing a naughty Dean Martin song in the style of Dean Martin,
well,
check it out.
You'll get like a 1940s song, like by a female singer of the day. It'll appear to be, but the song's called "I Like It in the Pooper." And there's a Frank Sinatra song on there saying "I need 2 blowjobs a day."
That's going in the trailer.
All very mature. Yeah.
Over 18s only, folks.
And the irony is that we got onto that because within 2 sentences of me telling Becca there was a really interesting YouTube channel about Barcelona. So our links are getting more obscure. Literally, within 2 seconds of Barcelona, I'm showing Becca dirty Elvis songs.
Yeah, that's quite the segue. I was like, how does this relate?
So
I think it does. Oh dear.
we recorded with a film PhD the other day. And now we're talking about this. It's amazing how quickly the IQ drops away when the genius leaves the room, isn't it? Oh well.
Occasionally I do try to lift us out of the gutter, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah, I've kind of nailed our shoes into it, really.
You trying to find an uphill battle there, Becca. Oh.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, I've been doing it for 10 years, so, you know.
Yeah. Talking of doing Rebecca, what are we doing tonight, Rebecca?
We're doing Rebecca tonight.
Are we?
Do
you think we can last a couple of hours, or
we'll be doing what Mrs. Danvers would like to do? Or do you think
we'll just shoot our wad far too quickly on this show? Tell us about some nice film, Rebecca.
Yes, hopefully you'd like
this
to
do. This is going to get confusing.
No, sorry, Becca. I've done it now. I've done the doing Rebecca joke. So, right, Becca, what are we doing?
We're doing it.
Yes, doing it.
Which is far too innocent. I don't think she'll know that we're doing it. So, but
Okay,
yes, tonight.
What's he doing? That's no better. You sound like Rick Mail. Just if you want to do it. Anyway, carry on.
The Rick Mail is, I just want to
do it. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Oh god.
Well, no, he wanted to do it to those 2 birds at the bar. Bottom, season 1, episode 1.
Listeners, this is a very high culture podcast. You know, you get everything when you listen to us. You get Hitchcock, you get naughty lyrics, you get Bottom, you get Rick Mayall, you get the whole gamut, definitely.
Continue, Rebecca. Last time I call you that.
So yes, tonight we dream of going to Mandalay again as we discuss Rebecca, starring Laurence Olivier, Jane Fontaine, Judith Anderson, Nigel Bruce, Leo G. Carroll, who I'm convinced was born looking like that, with a fantastic score by Franz Waxman, based on Daphne du Maurier's classic text of the same name, Rebecca, obviously directed by Hitchcock, and released in 1940.
Another one I hadn't seen, and I didn't actually know it's another one I didn't know was based in Cornwall.
Yeah, it's down your neck of the woods.
I didn't know that because Mandalay is not, it's not Trethal or some weird Cornish name, is it?
No, that's true. Actually, it's not really. I think some of the place names in the book as well are they're not.
And I dreamt
Cornish
of
sounding.
Mandalay makes it sound somewhat exotic. So the two references would be so that sounds like either an exotic holiday or the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino in Las Vegas where there used to be big fights.
Well,
so
there we are.
it was one of the two. Lennox Lewis fought there, but there you go. I didn't think it was that, but I didn't think it was Cornwall. And she didn't exactly go, well, I dreamt of St. Austell.
No, I dreamt of Truro.
Yeah.
I dreamt of
Truro.
Bodmin Hall. No.
Yes.
She lived down that way as well, didn't she? So
she did.
Maurier.
So you've probably got some facts coming up later about the book. But as we talk through this, I've watched two versions in preparation for this before we do first thoughts. So just my background with the film is non-existent. I've never seen it before. My wife likes the film. She's seen it before. She didn't get to watch it with me now because I watched it today when she wasn't around. But I will watch it with her again because she likes it and I'm happy to watch it again. So just a few observations. I didn't know it was set in Cornwall. I didn't know it was this length. A 2 hour, 10 minute.
It's a 2 hour job. Yeah, 2 hour job.
At this point, it's not too long. I've got no complaints with it, but I wasn't expecting that because we've been doing these sort of 75-minute jobs for like
well, we've
weeks
crossed
now.
the pond now, so it's getting longer.
Yeah.
As they say.
First American film set in Cornwall, which is just confusing. But there you
Set
go.
in South California.
Isn't it amazing how Cornwall looks in no
Looks
way
like nothing like
the
Southern
United States?
California.
Yeah, so I wasn't expecting that. Lots about it. I not seen it before, so today I sat down and watched this and immediately followed it with the Netflix version, the 2020 version that's on Netflix, made by Ben Wheatley. It's a very strange choice, and maybe we'll talk a bit about that because I saw differences.
I've seen all the other versions, but I've still not seen that one.
Have you read the book? I'm assuming you have.
I have.
Right. So if you've read the book,
Let's just do first thoughts first.
We will in a minute. I just want to say because I won't ruin what the plot change is, but there is a difference in the plot of the book, at least one from this film. A major thing about the leading man, right?
Yep.
And the Netflix version goes with the book, even though it's very, very similar to this in a lot of ways. This obviously had the sort of Hays Code issues and studio as much as Hays Code.
Yeah, hamstrung by the Hays Code pretty much.
Yeah, although I don't necessarily think that hurts it. So my background with the film knew nothing about it other than I remember a woman I worked with years ago whose daughter was called Rebecca because she loved this film. It tended to be a lot of people I knew who liked this film tend to be female without giving any impression that it appeals only to women.
Well, no, because it's a romance as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Handsome Byronic hero, young ingenue.
My wife's seen very little Hitchcock, but loves this film and I think the book. I'm not sure. I need to ask her. She's not here right now. So yeah, that's my background with the film. I've watched two
Chris,
versions.
How about you? What's your interaction?
Previous the Zero. I mean, like Dave. I've not seen it at all.
No, Chris, in the future.
Yeah, in the future, what will it be?
So before watching it for this episode, I hadn't seen it. I mean, I know that it was done a remake on Netflix, which, from the little I've heard of it, hasn't been well received.
We'll talk about it a little bit later because I have seen it now, and I don't think Becca has. So.
No, that's one of the ones I've not seen, but I think it's been eclipsed by the whole Armie Hammer thing, to be honest.
We
Anyway,
can talk about that too.
Carry on, Chris. Go for it. What else? What else can you tell us?
I've Hammer just completely threw me off track there.
Oh, sorry.
No. I mean, I think it like the remake wasn't that well received from what I heard. I don't know whether that's just because this is like a classic. It's like, why would you remake? Wow, it's like, I don't know, let's remake Gone with the Wind. Why? Or Citizen Kane. Just like you're just asking for trouble. Aren't you? It's like
what I lack is the ability to have like gone away and thought about it and let both of them settle. I've seen them both within the last 6 hours, but I will later in the episode address why I think it may not be as well reviewed, and what I did and didn't like about it. I can talk about that.
But I haven't seen the remake, so I can't really speak to it myself. But yeah, no. I mean, this was a completely fresh screening, as I've been most of Hitchcock for me. So yeah, are we doing first thoughts as well, or are we?
Well, Becca, I suppose you can do your bit on how have you always known this film? Obviously not at birth.
So
but
yeah, obviously being called Rebecca myself, although I'm not named any way in relation to the book. I think it's to do with Rebecca Sunday Book Farm. From what I gather, and obviously I did actually have Knotted Cord, so a bit TMI there, but there we are.
Oh, there's a story with my name. I'm called Dave because my parents had no imagination whatsoever.
But David is a fantastic name. It's very noble.
Fine, perfectly. I got off quite light. It could have been a lot worse.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously being called Rebecca, like there's so much hype surrounding it. It's one of the few Hitchcocks that I'd never actually seen. I read the book ages ago, like at school, because it's fantastic, really kind of gothic, verging on kind of like gothic horror almost. And it's probably one of my favourite Demores as well. But yeah, I literally hadn't read it for ages, so kind of reading it afresh for this podcast, I was like, oh, okay. Not remembering any of it at all. Yeah, I'd not seen any of the I didn't realise there had been so many different adaptations as well.
Quite a few, by the look of it.
There's quite a few which I'll go into. But listeners,
well, I just put pay to what I've just said about like, why would you remake a classic? Well, yeah, loads of people have.
Well, North by Northwest.
What you often get though with where there's a book behind it. How many times have you heard? Yeah, well, it's not actually a remake where we're readapting the original text, exactly. and then you watch it, it's a fucking remake.
It's a remake.
Yeah.
Well, it's just it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, it's a classic text. I mean, it's a romance. It's kind of gothic. It's verging on the horror as well. There's sort of comedy in there as well. I mean, it's one of those ones that is really ripe for adaptation. I think that's probably what keeps it so fresh as well. Like new versions can be developed all the time. There's constantly new readings that can be done of it. The characters are really timeless. Sort of themes are kind of it's like with Shakespeare as well. I mean, obviously that's kind of been famously various plays have been adapted for the screen and other formats as well. And just there's so much that can be drawn from it really, because it's at the heart of it. I mean, yes, it's kind of very much like gothic horror almost, with this terrifying figure of Mrs. Danvers and kind of like the monstrosity of Mandalay. Obviously, you've got sort of connections to Vertigo and Psycho as well. You kind of got like Carlotta kind of looking over everything, and themes of obsession as well.
I thought you were winding me up when you said there were lesbian undertones in it. Aren't there ever? It's really pushing it for the era.
Well, it really is. I mean, this is not new. Listeners, we're going to spoil the hell out of this. So if you haven't seen the film, if you haven't read the book, pause it now.
And if you like your lesbianism fresh.
Yes. Yeah, how soft it is, and they're quite hands-on. Although apparently Dame Judith Anderson herself was gay. But obviously it was all kind of like hidden by the code and kind of very sort of veiled.
Well, it's hidden by the code in this, but it's shot so close to the mark
I think
that there's no doubt.
Viewing it with the modern eyes, we can kind of see, it's strikingly obvious to us, but obviously back then it kind of had to be quite sort of well hidden.
You could almost characterise it as same-sex obsession.
Just a quick question: is that stuff in the book, or is it hinted in the book, or is this like purely?
So, well, yeah, in the book, towards the end, there's obviously we know how it ends. But I think there's I can go and get it. I can try and find it. We've got
to wait for you to read it then, haven't we?
This is it, exactly.
Can you listen for 6 hours?
Basically, there's a line. Basically, that obviously there's it's suggested that Rebecca and Favell have had an affair, and it turns out that actually Rebecca's ill. She's dying, one thing and another. But in it, I think there's a line where Mrs. Danvers is something like, she didn't like men, or she was basically above, sort of typical male-female relationships, essentially. So I think it's hinted at a little bit.
It's
I think
taking all jokes out of it. It's obsession between people who happen to be of the same gender, as opposed to lesbianism per se.
It's kind of thinly veiled, but I think it's quite interesting knowing that Judith Anderson herself was gay, and then obviously she was asked about it and about all the subtext, and she was like, "Well, I don't know what you're on about," and I was speaking to John Cork about this actually on our on the Tracks of 007 trip to Thailand that we'd just been on, and we were both of the mind, we were like, I think she knew what was going on, so a little bit sus there, but I think it's kind of subtly hinted at a little bit, but it's something that's come out definitely with more modern readings, and as Neil Alcock says in his new book, his book that came out earlier this year, Hitchcock, he does kind of also focus on the fact that it's kind of these undertones are there for sure, definitely. But I think in the book, there is a line that Mrs. Danvers says that basically Rebecca was above traditional relationships, didn't really care for men, basically treated Max as a plaything, essentially, just something for her own amusement. She was kind of playing at being the perfect wife and would play at being the perfect mother, and was just generally just a bitch, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any reference to her personal life that way.
No, there's no. So she's kind of like Danvers is like this sort of ghostly figure. You don't really know too much about her. She, like, even in the film as well, for example, like you rarely see her enter or leave a room. She just appears behind you. Yeah. A little bit ghostly. And there's kind of little subtle hints, like when she's kind of at the end about sort of how Rebecca died and everything like that. She finally lets out her emotion. She's kind of got this kind of really sort of emotionless face throughout the film, and then she finally affords herself a little bit of emotion towards the end. But anyway, first thoughts anyway. I'd read it in a long time. I'd not seen this film before. I'd not seen any of the other adaptations, which we'll talk about later on as well. So I've tried to hoover them up as quickly as I could in preparation for this. Unfortunately, I've still not seen the 2020 version. I've literally just not got around to it. I've had 4 years and I've still not got around to it.
I'm sure Armie Hammer will be making a sequel anytime soon.
No, he'll be doing very much anytime soon. Although I enjoyed Lily James in Downton Abbey, she was really cool. And Kristen Scott Thomas as well as Miss Danvers. I'm sure she'll be fantastic. But I kind of feel like the whole thing, and as you said, Ben Wheatley seems an odd choice, but he's made kind of dark movies and that before, so I think he'd be quite a good choice. Yeah, but they've picked the wrong type of dark. Yeah, it does kind of feel like it does kind of lean more into sort of like the gothicness of it. But I kind of feel like it's been overshadowed by Armie Hammer being cancelled. But I probably will check it out, just because obviously I've read the book, seen the film, read the theme tune, seen the theme tune. So I've just got to do it to cap things off. That was my introduction to the novel, really. It's just one of the things, obviously, having that name and had so much hype surrounding it. I've just gone and left it for years and years, and then I've finally gotten around to it, and I'm glad I did. Because the film, I can see why it's much beloved by Hitchcock fans. Definitely, it's a beautiful kind of sweeping epic. Jo Fontaine is gorgeous. She's perfect for the role. Laurence Olivier as well. I think I probably prefer his Shakespearean roles, I would say, but he's quite a solid Max as well. Nigel Bruce, I enjoy from the Sherlock Holmes films, 1940 Sherlock Holmes films.
Funny you say that, because Jeremy Brett was in a version, wasn't he?
We'll come to that. Shall I go through that now?
No, just that one thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, he was in it. And because I didn't realise as well, because obviously that version, Anna Massey, was Mr. Danvers. I didn't realise they were married for a little bit. I think married for about 4 years. Okay. I think from 58 to 62. And I never knew that. I was obviously a huge fan of both.
Well, I did, but obviously Jeremy Brett.
I didn't realise.
As well.
Because obviously they were married when she was making Peeping Tom, which is amazing. So I wonder if he ever visited the set. which I'm trying to find out, but I don't think it's going to be the case. And yeah, because I think obviously I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan as well, and obviously Basil Rathbone is like the iconic big screen Holmes, but obviously on the small screen it's Jeremy Brett. I'm firmly in that camp, unfortunately. So when I found out that he made a version, I was like, ooh, and very handsome he does look as well. So it has to be said. So yeah, that's my initial thoughts.
Chris, you want to go next?
Yeah. So first thoughts. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to really say, really. I'm sorry. Let me start that again.
There's really not much to say, is there?
No.
What do you think?
I suddenly turned into a Spanish weather news presenter. Chris Waddle. Not
sure.
No, so sorry. I think you just caught me off guard. I was just like reading about Armie Hammer's allegations.
It is a long article. I can't remember, where was it? It's a big like expose article from about 4 years ago. I'll find it.
It's something like that, wasn't it? Just basically.
And I will tell you where it is rather than be too. We don't need to be linking it particularly, but I'll tell you in a minute where that is.
Thank you.
But yeah, I like the film.
What did you enjoy? Any bits that you liked especially, or anything you didn't like? Obviously it's 1940, so it's quite old now.
Yeah, so it was nice that it was like over 90 minutes. That was the first sort of thing. It's like, it's very atmospheric. That was a lot of the vibe I got. I think the main performances were really good. Particularly, is it the lead actress? Is it Joan? I can't want to say.
Jane Fontaine.
Jane Fontaine, yes.
Jane Fountain.
Jane Fountain, yes.
Jane Fountain, yeah.
Sister of Olivia de Havilland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For performance, which is well, basically for a character which is kind of very meek and very sort of shy and doesn't want too much limelight. It's can be very easy for that to be not very engaging. You kind of don't tend not want to follow those, but I thought she found a way to make it work, where we sort of just follow her journey through. But yeah, I think there's definitely like a presence of that, of the overbearing of the pressure of wanting to fit in and that kind of awkwardness, which I think is kind of what was it Dave, or I think what Dave mentioned about how mostly women tend to sort of
yeah. I'm not saying women like this more than men. I'm saying that coincidentally or not, a handful of women in my life, across my life, not people who were part of my life necessarily, have either loved this film or named their kids after this film, and I don't ever remember talking to a man about this film.
Yeah, I think.
No.
I think I mean, obviously, it's all anecdotal anyway, but
it's anecdotal. I've got no evidence.
I'm sure its male fans must exist somewhere along the line.
If I was to speculate why that would be the case, I would probably say it's just that this is sort of film or story which women can identify with a lot of time, with that kind of socio pressure, that kind of peer pressure from other females, just kind of that kind of overbearingness to sort of like present yourself in one manner.
I just had a bit of a brainwave, actually.
Sorry?
I had a bit of a brainwave.
Oh, okay.
That's probably not really a brainwave. Just
like a light bulb moment.
Yeah, a little bit of a light bulb. But I don't know. I feel like I'm going to derail you, Chris. I do apologise.
No.
Derail myself, definitely. But I wonder, was Rebecca almost kind of like, not abusing, but was she obviously wasn't very nice to Max during their marriage. So yeah, I can kind of see. I probably agree with you. It does seem to be like what was called like a women's film, even though that term is horribly outdated.
Yeah,
but
I'm
the
not even
romance-
calling it that. I'm just saying
No,
it
no,
resonated. It's
exactly.
resonated with a
I
fair
am
few
not
women
calling
I've known.
that either, definitely. But I think it's firmly because you've got a romance at the heart of it, and you've got a very handsome hero in Laurence Olivier.
I know, but
very
that
beautiful.
just makes it look like all like Chris and I want is like car chases and tits.
Well, you've had that in some
which
previous
might be
films.
true, but we can.
Or when we get in North by Northwest, that's what we do get. But yeah, no, I think because obviously kind of you got the romance at the heart of it for sure. And obviously with the light of Armie Hammer and the rest of it as well. But
like
I kind
romance
of
with a
wonder,
mysterious guy.
Yeah.
He's wealthy, handsome, but like there's an air of danger and mystery to him.
this is it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll mention it now, but I won't talk about it or go into much detail till we discuss another film as well. But this has been mentioned on Hitchpod. But there's basically a cycle of films in the sort of like 40s, 50s, which has been coined by a critic. As basically it's called like "Don't Trust Your Husband." That's what he dubbed it. And it's those sort of kind of films where, like for example, Gaslight, the various versions of Gaslight that we've had. This film also counts, also Suspicion. We'll probably talk about it more when we get there. But it's just basically that kind of a young wife in an Edwardian setting marries a rich older man, her husband, who turns out to be a nutcase. But in this case, obviously Max, he's got a mysterious past. But in this case, it's Rebecca who's the psycho. But yeah, I sort of wonder, was not abusive as such. I don't know if that's too strong a word to use, but obviously
She was sleeping around. She
wasn't very nice to
whoever
him.
she wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
So I
come
kind
to
of
that.
want not to kind of sorry to append you there a bit, Chris, but I just suddenly thought, just because I haven't really studied this novel since school in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, I've been kind to agree with you guys. Definitely, it does seem to be very much have like a large. I'm sure it does have the male fans, but it does seem to be like a largely female fan base.
Yeah, because I just think.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I think that's why, because female, it's quite a female-centric story as well, because that's what I was saying.
Yeah, well, it's from her point of view, isn't it? I mean, we don't know the name of this second Mrs. De Winter, but it's very much from her point of view, so we are stuck with her, whether we like it or not.
Far more common for wives to be a bit younger, a bit less experienced than their husbands, and also that sort of more buttoned-up nature to men of that time. More casual.
And she marries like above her class as well, doesn't she? I think.
Yeah. Well,
slightly above the station.
notionally, yes, if you believe in that.
Yeah, actually slightly.
I mean, when you consider the one of the reveals, it's starkly obvious why he would go for someone who probably is the complete opposite, because the pressure of the second Miss De Winter, because she's not named, is she? Or is she?
No, I don't think she has a name.
No, she doesn't.
Yeah,
I think one of the actual there's two kind of I think there's a prequel and a sequel book written. I don't think she's given a name in either of those. We find out Mrs. Danvers' first name, but I don't think we ever find out like second Mrs. De Winter's name.
So yeah, because I mean that I think that's kind of adds to the point, because Rebecca, who is it's not even presence in the film, but her presence is within the film. She's kind of completely overshadowed. We don't even see a picture of her.
No.
So it's but you always get this painted picture of she's everything that she's not. So when we find the reveal, or one of the reveals later on, it's not surprising that Max would go for her, or choose her.
I
She's really
like
kind
the
of bold.
concept of naming the film after someone who's not in it.
Yeah.
I love that idea, because Iron Man should have been called, Jeffrey Dixon or something.
Yeah, imagine.
Yeah.
Was it if they called Psycho like Mrs. Bates or something like that? Would it be more mysterious? Probably not.
Yeah.
So, Mrs. not appearing in this film.
Yeah. I giggled at one point though when I giggled at one point because it just made me think of the man with two brains, because he's got the ex-wife who he like still worships, and when he's about to marry Kathleen Turner, he's saying to her painting, like, just give me a sign, and the whole house shakes and the thing spins and it's going no, and he just says, just any sign, just let me know. Yeah, The Man with Two Brains is a great film for scholars of Rebecca, probably. It's always very difficult because we do these over a number of weeks and months, and
I've been away on holiday for 10 days. I would,
and I moved house, so there's like
yes, life happens. I apologise, listeners. Yeah, we've been off for about a month, I think. The last time we recorded was probably in August.
Well, yeah. The only other thing is, though, we did do a recording in the middle, but that's a recording for a later date. We have referred to it on our social media, so we'll
release it down the line.
But we've done a bonus episode to go with another review, and it's pretty much the length of a standard episode as well. It's like an hour and 31 or something like that. Yep. So we've done that, and I edited it a couple. Because it was quite pleasant actually. Because when I went to edit it, I'd not heard it for a couple of weeks because there was no hurry. So it was just like editing something I'd not heard before. But I'm
glad it was a pleasant experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just to be got through editing generally. Although I don't dislike it, but when you find yourself laughing at our own jokes because you've forgotten them and it was about 2 weeks before, that's kind of funny. That's kind of nice, but
thanks very much to our honoured guests for putting up with us.
And we've also got it's just the fact that, like, if you're enjoying the recording, you think, well, I've done that right, whereas when you're editing, you don't always know. But editing normally, but in terms of this is probably, I've said this a couple of times, and it's leading me to doubt myself because I've said it in the series so far, and it could just be a result of the fact standards are still going up. But I think this is my favourite so far. But it's a long time since I've seen, The Man Who Knew Too Much and the 39 Steps and all the rest of it. But I think this is probably my favourite so far. Remembering I didn't love Jamaica in particularly.
Jamaica Man. I think that was a bit of. To be fair, I almost wasn't going to include it, but then I thought, it's obviously got the Cornish setting, and that's around your neck of the woods, Dave. So I thought, and I know there's one that you said that you wanted to do as well. So I thought, I'll add it in.
I'm glad I did it, but part of trying these things is you may not like some of them, and I don't want, like I've said before, I don't want week after week of it's amazing. Jamaica.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that shortly.
We will do shortly, I'm sure. Although even in his best era, there's things I'm not as fond of. But
there are some films I have left out. Like, for example, this whole series. I've said it before as well, but I'm not doing all of his over, but like the majority, certainly of his US output as well. Like, the majority is there. Maybe apart from like 2 or 3 films, perhaps.
I know it becomes a lot more consistent after next week because there's even stuff that's not in the Masterpiece collection from that period where I'm trying to source it.
Shocking.
But no, in terms of my first thought on it, obviously having seen 2 versions today, I was able to make a bit of a judgment on casting, and admittedly that's not having read the book, but I think Olivier, I'm not even talking about his overall qualities as an actor because obviously he's one of the most celebrated actors.
He's one of the great actors, isn't he?
But just in this role, and it probably why he wasn't particularly book faithful, but it's probably why he wasn't a bad choice for Heathcliff either, because there's a balancing in light and dark here. In Heathcliff, it's for completely different reasons, but for here, it's almost suspense reasons. Is this guy dangerous? What is it about him? But he's got
those qualities where you can kind of like he's got that duality to him.
Yeah, because he's actually quite a good-looking guy, but he's got a darkness to him as well.
A bit of an edge to him.
Joan Fontaine, it's a difficult one because, like Chris says, or one of you said, I think it was Chris, it would be easy for this to be really bland, and I thought she was outstanding. How good she'd have been in other things.
She's still innocent. She does it really well.
She plays really.
Can you imagine Olivia de Havilland in the role? I mean, she's fantastic. She's a brilliant actress for sure.
No, I think part of the reason
much more famous.
No, I think Olivia de Havilland is probably slightly better actress, and I think that's actually that.
With all due respect, I don't think she'd be right in the role.
She'd be wrong for this role. I think that's exactly it. And I've just seen a version with Lily James from 4 years ago. I can't remember when Lily James was born. She's probably late 20s making it. And there's, even with her, who isn't the most worldly looking of people, she just looks a bit too worldly and almost too old, bizarrely.
I wonder, do you have in that version as well? But obviously, because there is admittedly, I don't know what the age gap was between
About 20 years.
Laurence Olivier and Joan
About
Fontaine.
20 years.
Yeah, also there is meant to be obviously quite a considerable age gap.
Sorry, no, I'm wrong. About 10 years. 12
About 10 years. Okay, well, not,
Sorry, because
not too
Olivier
bad.
was. Sorry, Olivier was born in 1907 and she was 1917. 10 years.
Okay, so it's 10-year
I've
age
got
gap.
that wrong.
Okay, so kind
Yeah.
of
Would be
similar
simple.
then.
Yeah, but so no, she has to at least be lacking in worldliness. It isn't about going and getting some young jailbait. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do
Jailbait,
with the
she's
fact
17.
she's a second wife who is not quoted Red Dwarf there,
But yeah, sorry.
and I can even
But
tell you
it's jailbait, that's what I think of.
I can even tell you it's Gunman of the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's because he's having sex on his virtual machine. Anyway, yeah.
Sorry.
She's not. It was the ball girl at Wimbledon. Anyway, the point is that I think that it's not about age. It's about worldliness and self-confidence. You need a woman who hasn't been married before, partly because of the era and partly because of lack of experience with all that. You need a woman who just doesn't feel quite comfortable in her own skin or the elevated position she now finds herself in. And even Lily James, who I think is a pretty decent actress, didn't quite convey that the same way. And watching, I'll talk more about the sequel, the remake in a bit, but Armie Hammer can't give it the light and shade either, and I'll talk more about him in a bit. So I'm just going to sign off with saying at this point, I'm just going to stop at this point by saying it's the best one I've seen so far. It's the best cast film I've seen so far. It's the best designed film I've seen so far. And I can't really give it much higher praise than that. We do still have better coming, but this is by far the best we've had so far. And it's the first time I can say it without caveats. It's not bad, but it's good, but it's silent. It's good, but it's cheap. It's good, but it's really short. It's good, but the casting's crap. No, this is just good. And that's my opening thoughts.
On that bombshell.
But would it be as good with the original ending?
Oh,
Or with the book's ending?
Has it really been hamstrung by the Hays Code? As it famously was?
Again, I'll talk more about that at the end because I'll give you a quick sort of précis of the remake. On one viewing of each, and despite the fact you probably should always follow the book, it depends. As a satisfying story and a suspense thing, I kind of prefer the way this film does it. In terms of the light and shade in her sort of becoming a woman, if you like, her going from complete, and it happens in one scene almost, where she
I suppose you've got shades of Blake in there as well, because you've got from innocence and experience, and literally she does grow up in a scene, doesn't she?
If she's going to grow up and question her own morals and values, then the book version's better. It depends what you want, and we'll explain that when we get to it.
Depends kind of what you want out of it, definitely.
I think for that degree of because I mean there's endless women out there and men, I imagine, but let's focus on women for this point, who are like married to prisoners who've done pretty heinous crimes, and they're not bad people, these women, but they'll stay with them and they'll kind of turn a blind eye to it, and of course what we're getting at is what he's accused of in the film he actually did in the book.
Yeah, it's a bit different. I mean, spoiler alert, obviously, because of the Hays Code, the book obviously has to make out that it's an accident, that she dies due to an accident. But obviously in the book, it's insinuated that obviously her and Favel, her first cousins, were having an affair.
No, they were having an affair. In all versions.
But then she has cancer and she's actually really ill. And it's all kind of she's basically engineered her own death, basically. That's kind of what blows the suicide.
Shall we discuss this film sequentially?
Definitely. Shall I give you a little bit of what I've written about Selznick as well, just to break things up a little bit?
Yeah, please, and then go straight into where the film starts.
Here we go. Yes, so a little bit about Selznick. I've obviously Franz Waxman did the score. I really hope that Charlie will do a music episode with us and include a little bit about Waxman. Neil Brand, famous music writer and broadcaster and general music guru, has probably done lots of programs, written lots of books about Waxman. If you can seek them out, fantastic. I could hear him talk for hours, but I won't mention much about him here, only that I hope that Charlie will do a music episode with us and include a little bit. If not, I will ask him nicely. Hopefully he will. But I've written a little bit about Selznick anyway. So as we know, Hitchcock left the UK for America in 1939 to work with Selznick. He ended up staying in America for the next 3 decades, making what was to become some of his most famous work. Working in the US with bigger budgets and also with Selznick afforded Hitchcock the gloss that he desperately sought. If Hitchcock found working with Charles Laughton on Jamaica Inn challenging, Selznick was on a whole nother level. Hitchcock obviously was famously able to separate his home life and his work life, being somewhat passive-aggressive as a producer-director, whereas Selznick was also famously quite a micromanager. He'd stay up until the small hours, firing off notes and memos to his production staff, taking all manner of pills so he could stay awake into the small hours and harass his production staff. But despite their different, obviously this is in a bit of a nutshell. There are biographies and histories that you can read that will paint a better picture. Likewise, I don't mean any shade on either Hitchcock nor Selznick. They both have the different styles of working to varying effects on their careers. Both were hugely successful in their own right. This is just like a précis about it, because I remember they asked me in a previous episode and I was like, we'll do that when we come to Rebecca, so I'm doing it now. So yeah, despite their different ways of working, obviously together they produced some of the best films. Obviously Rebecca, Spellbound, 1945, Notorious, the year later, and The Parodying Case in 1947, which I probably won't be covering. Don't know, we'll find out later. However, despite the differences, they kind of complemented each other quite well. There's a really fantastic book called by Leonard Leff, Hitchcock and Selznick, The Rich and Strange Collaboration about Hitchcock and David O. Selznick. Highly recommend that book. It's fantastic reading, really, really interesting. So Leff says that Hitchcock added bite to Selznick's style. Selznick added American gloss to Hitchcock's, which I think sums it up perfectly. To a certain extent, Hitchcock was able to further his career. So yeah, he produced some of his best work in America before returning back to England in the 70s. Whereas I think with Selznick, obviously he'd made Gone with the Wind by that point. And he was really kind of struggling. He just really wanted to capitalise on that. But I don't think it ever arguably didn't quite happen. But that's just my opinion, really. And so, yeah, he kind of did struggle a little bit. But I mean, he still had quite a successful career, as we know. So Hitchcock was seen by Selznick as both a sort of creative partner, really, and also something of a commodity as well. But Hitchcock ultimately wanted, and it obviously eventually became a successful independent producer-director. But arguably, sort of 10 years later, I think by 1948, 49, their working relationship was over, really. Obviously, Selznick passed away in 1965. Hitchcock went until 1980, until he passed away, unfortunately. But yeah, it was quite interesting.
Professionally, he was done in about 76.
Well, yeah, he really was. I mean, I think there sort of comes a point where I think his lifestyle had a lot to do with it as well. Obviously, kind of like to kind of be, in tight control of everything. Obviously, he was kind of more like, in terms of his filmmaking as well, he sort of, obviously Hitchcock was very focused on plot and the technical details. Whereas Selznick was more sort of like character, sort of feeling, emotion. You can kind of tell like kind of the sweeping epic and the visuals of it as well. And then you kind of got the characterization and the sort of plot. And the kind of everything that's going on in the background is all Hitchcock as well. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I was going to say oil and water, but I don't think that's really appropriate. So also they complemented each other in many ways as well. But I kind of think definitely working with a character like Laughton, who obviously Hitchcock famously said, you don't make a Laughton picture, you just referee it. And I kind of feel like he kind of did the same here. So he was constantly obviously battling Selznick for sort of control. But they balanced off each other quite well as well. But yeah, I can highly recommend Leff's book. Well worth reading. Yeah, definitely. So that's all a little bit from me. Unfortunately, I just thought I'd do a little bit of prep just about the making of this film. Obviously, I recommend Neil Alcock's book as well. He goes through and basically gives you a nice little précis and tells you about the background of making this film as well, and how kind of basically Hitchcock himself kind of like battled against each other. Obviously, it's very much a Hitchcock film. It's very much a Selznick film, but with Hitchcock elements as well, such as, whereas obviously Jamaica Inn was obviously a Laughton picture, but with Hitchcock elements. So I would kind of say the same for this one as well. So it's very much kind of like it was obviously a Selznick picture. And then we come to obviously feature films where sort of backs off a little bit, but it's still very much Hitchcockian elements coming through. But I think perhaps if he hadn't worked with Lawton and kind of had that kind of really sort of like challenge that he had working with a character such as he, then perhaps he might have got like the shock of his life working with a producer like Selznick, who was very much at the opposite end of Hitchcock, working a totally different way. So it really kind of set him up, you know, give him some good experience there. But I think despite this, you know, they've created legendary films. Like Rebecca is certainly up there as one of the best films ever made. I think it's made it onto one of the AFI sort of lists at the end as well. But I think, yeah, just despite this sort of contentious relationship, they produce these classics. So, you know, we're just very grateful, really, as fans, that they produce some amazing work.
This is a Best Picture winner, so.
Well, it was, exactly. I mean, it's a shame that he never really won Best Director. But, like, yeah, obviously he won, you know, best film for this one, and rightly so. You know, I think they were relieved when they did. I think so.
To be fair, I don't know what else. I'm just looking at what else was nominated that year.
Oh yes,
outstanding production. Well, he had Foreign Correspondent as well, nominated same year. Grapes of Wrath, The Great Dictator.
Grapes of Wrath, that was it. Yeah.
The Great Dictator, Charlie Chaplin film.
Yep, Charlie Chaplin. Yep. So it's stiff competition, really.
The Philadelphia Story's on there. That's a fairly strong year.
That's a really good film. Check that out if you can. That's a really interesting film.
And all this business of, they nominate more than 5 now. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that year.
Well, exactly. Just got to go back and know the history a little bit, really, haven't they? So
his nomination was for Rebecca, though.
Yep.
His personal nomination.
Academy Award nomination.
Jimmy Stewart won Best Actor for The Philadelphia Story.
I think Waxman got the Oscar for his theme as well, didn't he, for Rebecca? I'm pretty sure he got a nomination.
It won 2, but I can't remember what the second one was.
You.
I could look, but that would require me to make some effort.
Objective Burma? No. Humorous. Oh, Sunset Boulevard. That's probably what it was. Yeah, Placing the Sun and Sunset Boulevard for Waxman.
It's a fairly strong year, anyway.
That was until the 50s, so. Oh, yes, that's my little blurb about Selznick. Highly recommend that book. Listeners, I'm sure you'll know more than me, but yeah, do get in touch.
And quickly,
if you've got any stories, anything like that. So should we go for it scene by scene?
We will. Just quickly before I forget, because I want to close the window for a start, because I've no reason to watch it, read it, or have it open. Vanity Fair it was, and they did an article in 2021 called "The Fall of the House of Hammer." And it's about Armie Hammer's family and what went on with him. But that's only going to be relevant to this film where I talk a little bit about the remake, and it will only be a little bit. I don't. No,
well, hopefully we'll discuss it because I don't want to go on too much about Armie Hammer. Thank you very much.
No, we will not. We will not. But it's given people the opportunity to go and read about it if they choose, and why he suddenly disappeared. I won't have a lot to say about him, particularly when I talk about the film, other than his casting. As for this film, we start in the south of France, don't we?
Monte Cristo.
Monte Carlo.
Monte Carlo, yes.
Yeah, it wasn't it wasn't a sandwich.
No, it wasn't.
Wasn't there Del Monte?
That would be a strange.
We start with cheese on toast.
We start with cheese on toast, definitely. I like how
cheese and pickle.
Cheese and pickle, definitely. I want to know, what instrument is it? I don't think it's a theremin, but it sounds like a theremin, but it's probably not. This kind of really sort of ghostly sort of music that opens up. I want to know what the instrument is. It's probably a violin.
One of our listeners will have to tell me, because I don't know. There is a fair bit of violin in this film, definitely.
Definitely. I like the kind of the ghostly nature, because it opens up. Obviously, you get those gates, and you're going down this sort of dreamlike driveway, and it's last night I went to Mandalay again, and it looks like something. It sounds like and looks like something, you know, out of a dream or a nightmare even. So. Yeah, we do eventually wend our way to Monte Carlo, which is nothing like Southern California.
Yeah, well, mind you, when they used to make The Saint, it would say Monte Carlo, and it was probably fucking Watford or something. They never went outside this country, and they just filmed places and they just labelled it as somewhere around the world.
It could be anywhere. It's actually like a park.
If we feel compelled to name her, which we probably won't need to, we'll just refer to her by the actress's name, Joan or something. She doesn't have a name. But she's working. She's like paid companion to a wealthy older lady, and we don't mean in that sort of paid companion way. We just mean she's like her assistant.
So PA.
And she sees, we don't know his name at this point, but we see Laurence Olivier's character, and to start with, it looks like he's about to jump off a cliff or something.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I think it's got kind of like a really kind of stark beginning. It's like all of a sudden.
I don't know if this is a strange re-edit, because where it looks like he's going to jump off does actually look a bit like Cornwall. So, but anyway, doesn't matter.
But yeah, it does a little bit. So until you see like the Lonesome Pine or whatever in the background, you think, oh, actually, it's Southern California.
So they are in Monte Carlo having a sandwich, and this Edith Van Hopper, as she's called, the older lady, she seems aware of this widower, Maximilian. He's called. We know him as Max.
She knows everybody, doesn't she? She always goes to Monte Carlo to seek up the social life and see who's there, and she singles Max out.
He's rich and he's widowed.
So get in there.
Now, I'm not quite sure if she wants him for herself, this older lady. She's writing him little letters and calling him naughty. But when he says he's engaged, she's delighted for him until she finds out who it is. But that's moving on a bit. So they meet this guy. They end up getting talking. I don't know how much we want to say about this section of the film. The elder woman gets sort of unwell, which is really overdone in the remake. But she's unwell, and so she's going out by herself, Joan. And Joan is ostensibly going to play tennis, but she's not. She's going for days out with Maxim. And they're sort of driving around the place, and they fall in love. Do we need to say much more than that, other than he does have his stern, quiet, serious, stony moments?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think I quite buy the love at this point.
It's quite quick, isn't it? They do.
You bought it in the Playboys when it was instant. You bad luck. You loved her.
Bad luck.
Well, that had depth and emotion.
Yeah, that's it. Better, deeper characters, Chris.
I mean,
right.
the real thing is you had time for the characters to
breathe. You're absolutely right.
And some of the, I think obviously some of the TV adaptations that we got later down the line, they did have that breathing space. So they could be a bit more.
The remake has it, and it's not a great thing actually.
No.
I think if you buy it, that. You've almost got to imagine it was set decades before this, that like.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Woman of a certain age want a husband.
The couple of other remakes as well. I mean, I've not seen the 2020 one. I probably will check it out just because I've seen all the others.
The film is a similar length, but they spend too long driving around different places. It's just not necessary. He's getting another note saying,
I think the Charles Dance Amelia Fox one. I think it's just probably just about out of time. I'd probably say also in the Jeremy Brett one, they probably take a little bit too long to get it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's different format, isn't it? And I think both of the TV adaptations, the 79 and the 97, that's going to confuse me, are about about 3 or 4 hours long each as well. So they're a bit more breathing space. Just also both of them are on YouTube as well, but the 1979 one is a bit of a revelation because apparently I don't think either of them are available commercially on DVD, perhaps maybe on eBay. Both of them are on YouTube, but the 1979 one is a bit of a revelation because I think previously it was available maybe in like 10 minute sort of snippets, and somebody, I'll see if I can post a link later on, somebody has managed to stitch all of it together and to almost create a kind of fan edit. I mean, they've tried to be as faithful as they can, and sort of amended some of the lighting, or some, certainly like the HD, for example, and basically there is an element of fan editing there as well. But basically, managed to produce a 4-hour epic of this adaptation in a more complete version than it's ever been available before.
Yeah. So there are trade-offs here. This is, admittedly, Gone with the Wind was made a year or two before, but 130 minutes is still longer than average for a film.
Still pushing it, isn't it?
We haven't got to like the epic era yet, really.
And we won't be doing Gone with the Wind. Thank you very much.
All right. I don't know what series that would go in. I don't know what series that. The Uncle Billy Cinematic Universe series. Yeah,
no,
right.
This is we are taking a break later on down the line to review a non-Hitchcock movie, but I don't think we'll ever be doing Gone with the Wind on this podcast. I don't think, as far as I'm aware.
It's a bit long. It's another one my wife likes, though, so I may end up with a copy at some point. So effectively, she becomes kind of infatuated with him, and
there's a bit of Stockholm syndrome, a little bit. I wonder.
a little bit, but no, it's you know, she is being spoiled, and she is quite taken with him, and of course, as soon as I think. What's she called? Van Hopper realizes she hasn't been having tennis lessons or anything like that, or it's she says, right, we're off to New York, and she's making constant excuses to leave the room there because she wants to speak to Maxim, and she wants to say, like, I've got to go, and I don't want to, and all the rest of it. You never get the impression she's angling for marriage as much as just to let him know, so that maybe there's some
she's
way
like,
of
all still available.
And this is so of its era, and I know somebody commented on one of our comments on one of our videos about how maybe we hadn't taken account enough of changing times. Quite the opposite. We just reserve the right to laugh at things like that. That we understand it's of its time. We started off with, you know, films in the 60s and stuff. We understand times change and we judge accordingly. But I did find this the most hilarious scene ever, the proposal. He goes in, he says, I'll get change in here, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, Hazecoat's not going to whip his knob out or nothing. Goes into the bathroom, and then he says it's New York or Cornwall, and she says, what, you need a marriage? No, I'm trying to propose to you, you fool, or something like that. It's something very like that. And then when she says yes, he immediately teaches her how to make a proper coffee, and I want the same for tea, thank you very much. And it's just so
it's all very English,
hilarious.
Isn't it?
It's so English and so of its time.
Upper class RP accents.
But I mean, he's just gone in the bathroom. We're assuming he's just only putting his clothes on, but there's a chance he's proposed while having a piss.
Well, I mean, that's what I mean about the love. I mean, like at the point where they're getting, you know, he's proposing. It seems like it's like takes by surprise. It's a bit of like, okay.
Yeah, she wasn't expecting it. I think to her it's more like
it's
a means of her getting away from Mrs. Van Hopper rather than marrying Maxim.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, well, I mean,
there's a bit of that as well.
Choices
he's got
go.
this big hole in his life.
If some handsome stranger offered me the choice, would you rather carry on working for the awful Miss Van Hopper?
Yeah,
or marry a rich handsome stranger?
Like,
well, I
you
know
working for an arsehole or be married and be like a life wedge to some sort of mysterious, aloof, handsome guy. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, I know where I would go. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd struggle to marry the handsome guy because that would require a big life choice. I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm up for that, to be honest with you.
I mean, it could be a marriage of convenience, so you could.
Well, that'd be right. As long as I'm not conveniently.
Yeah. It's just on paper. It's just like.
Okay. Hitchcock and something like that was very much.
Just so I can hear it. Just so I can hear it. Inherit. Okay, fair enough. Sell my story to the Mandalay. All right then. I'll be the lady of the house. I probably wouldn't have put on that dress and pissed him off either. All right, so
okay, speaking, lady of the house.
She's warned by Mrs. Van Hopper, you know, but it sounds like spite here. You know, you can't succeed. You're not up to it. So there's already something seeded about the first Mrs. De Winter. So he takes her back to what looks a bit like, at least from plates and background projections and everything else, it looks like the north coast of Cornwall to me. We find out because he mentions Mrs. Danvers. Don't worry about that. She runs the house, and you think maybe he's got a housekeeper James Bond style, but he's actually got a proper mansion with a full-on staff.
Yeah, with all the staff, and it's like Downton Abbey
and grounds and stuff like that. Yeah, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers. She's how can we describe her? I think it's fair enough to say.
Quite severe looking.
Well, Kristen Scott Thomas is far more glamorous than her, but she can play.
If you notice, they've kind of covered. I mean, I don't think we have. You have sort of various little snippets. We never kind of get a really good look at her. So in the book, for example, you say like she's got a very kind of slate face, or she wears a black dress. You know, it's kind of like you get snippets and you never really get a good look at her. Like we never really see Rebecca, really, to be honest.
I love the
but
fact
I've noticed I haven't seen Kristen Scott Thomas well in what I've seen in the trailers, but certainly in the 79 and the 97 versions, they seem to copy that same. You know, she's got a very kind of like severe, like hair scraped back into a bun. Not very much makeup.
Kristen Scott Thomas is not severe, but she can play cold.
Yeah, I think she's perfectly cast. Actually, you need somebody like that who can.
She is, and again in the brief bit I do on the trailer, I'll talk about on the remake. I'll talk about that.
If you were to gender swap it, it would probably be somebody like Jeremy Irons or Mark Strong or somebody like that.
I love what Chris just said. A psychotic Mrs. Doyle. Yeah. You want a fucking cup of tea?
Exactly. You want a fucking drink?
Tea?
Well, she is, exactly. That's the whole point. She's like, yeah, this maid,
Go
but she'll
on.
also, like, if she doesn't like you, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
So,
100%.
Everything about this house, and again, it's one of the things that I really like about this, and the house is at once grand and really austere and really stripped back. It's everything. There's rooms in it that look really quite well presented, but then the hallways are very dark. The entrances are very dark, and it's very
Yeah,
large.
it's like,
and a
it's
little
Gothic
cold.
monstrosity, really.
It is.
Yeah, like Bates House.
Shout out to
So
the incredible
you've got
model
lots of
work.
different rooms that you can actually, they're obviously off. I mean,
Incredible
typical-
model work, though, Becca, isn't it?
well, it
Incredible
is, yeah,
model work.
definitely. It's
This-
kind of, and
this
there's no
place
direct
does not
meddings in
exist.
sight.
No, there isn't.
Yeah, I don't actually know who did the model work here. But yeah, again, it's very, I mean, it's called, obviously you've got the Bates Mansion coming up as well. But it's similar to, oh my God. Charles Lawton, I've forgotten the name of it. Jamaica Inn. We've got these rooms that are kind of, that are very off limits, and you're not allowed to access. And you've got
It's a
aspects
whole wing here as well.
yeah, exactly, and you can never kind of really get like the scope and scale of it as well. And again, you've got kind of aspects of it. It's very much obviously kind of like Freudian psychology was kind of coming in at that kind of time as well, so like 40s, 50s, 60s. And you can kind of argue that sort of, different rooms represent different aspects of the psychic in one thing and another as well, and you have to be unlocked through psychotherapy, for example. So that's kind of like feeding through as well. Like we never see the whole of Mandalay.
Well,
it's very much a concept as it is a house.
That's great in thematic terms, and I take that on board because it's not something I really thought about because I haven't had the time to. But from a pure plot perspective as well, it's great for the light and shade of the leading man as well. That some rooms are kind of warm, some bits of it are not. And not only that, if you think a decent man in his position, he's put his new wife in a completely different wing of the house. Why dredge up horrible memories? It all ended terribly. There was a death. I don't want her to be thinking of the previous Mrs. De Winter.
Exactly.
But if you had something to hide and were evil, you'd probably do the same thing.
You probably
it's
would,
great
exactly.
It's great on the light and shade.
And
Everywhere
we don't know the fact that he's killed her just yet. It's kind of all right. And you've got kind of, obviously.
Well, he hasn't.
No, he has,
Not
but
in
we
this
don't know that immediately.
Not in this version, he hasn't.
No, not in this version. No, later on
No.
we do. But at the same time, again, you kind of got that theme of like your public persona and your kind of private inner self as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's, I mean, very upstanding, Max de Winter, blah blah blah. But he's also
no
this
idea.
murderer as well.
We've no idea where he's not a murderer. Not in this version.
Oh no, not in this version, but in the book he is.
Okay, so he keeps going to London and places like that on business, which is again very cold and distant. But what business is he in? Because it all looks like inherited money, but I don't know. Perhaps he's got a fruit and veg
Being a
fucking
landed
stall in
gentleman.
Albert Square or something.
Yeah.
So she's left on her own a lot, and it becomes quite clear that the sort of what's the role of the male who's in around the house? Frank. It's the guy who runs the lands, if you like.
You got Frith, who's the butler. You got Frank, who's basically like
groundskeeper.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
He's really nice. And then you've got this Mrs. Danvers who's cold. She's outwardly polite in that she's yes miss or yes ma'am or whatever, or very good ma'am or whatever. But
actually she hates your guts.
Something is not right. And this just goes on for several scenes, and we can probably go past a lot of this. Rebecca's monogram is on a lot of things. The wing is shut off, and everything's kept as it was, even her hairbrush. And you just assume he's done that, and you're assuming that, like, wow, he's got effectively that whole wing is a shrine to his dead wife.
I kind of got the vibe. I think obviously going in, I did know a little bit about this, and to me, it's clear that she's done that and not her, not him. Like she's kept up that shrine, and it's all just.
That's clear to me, but I don't think it would be clear to Joan. Yeah.
Joan Fontaine, no.
Well, no, but she doesn't have a character name, so I'm just calling her Joan. But
no.
So, can we go as far forward as
we need to give her a name. If she was going to have a name, what would she be called?
That's why I'm calling her Joan.
Joan. We'll call her, I don't know, Anne.
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey.
Okay.
Bob.
All right. Okay. So, well, that's what we've
Jeffrey.
decided Iron Man's now called. Jeffrey Thompson, the new Marvel film.
This is historic. We've given her a name. Her name is Jeffrey.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, can we go forward to? Do we need to talk about all the bits in between, or I suppose we need to mention the Flavel character?
Oh, Flavel, yes.
He turns up very, very friendly with Mrs. Danvers,
so he's,
and they're talking privately when they can't.
In the film.
Go on.
Yeah, he's a little bit different to how he is like in the book and the film as well. Because I think obviously the book goes into more detail. Well, it's kind of, obviously they're sort of cousins, first cousins, and seem to be having this relationship. But if you can check out the 1997 version. He's played by an actor called Jonathan Cake, who I think he was quite famous in the 90s. He popped up on TV quite a lot, obviously being very, very handsome, and often quite a shirt off. But he plays the Flavel character. I read an amazing review. It said more ham than cake, which sums it up, unfortunately.
Right. Is he related to the father Benny Cake who sang Vienna?
Well, I wish he was, but probably not.
Ted joke. That's a deep cut Father Ted joke, to be fair. So
he might not be.
Really, there's not much to say about these few scenes because they're a cumulative effect of her thinking people are talking about her behind her back, which they sort of are because they think she's a sort of
it all just kind of serves really to make sure that she's very much, she's kind of in the minority. She's not yet lady of the house. She feels very
sister
intimidated.
and brother-in-law are very nice. They start off by saying she's a bit below stairs, but when they meet her, they're very nice to her. So his immediate family like her, but you got this Flavel character who's coming around and talking to Danvers, and they're sort of saying she'll never hear you and all the rest of it.
There's also a relationship going on, not relationship, there's a friendship going on between
there's
Flavel
something we don't know and they don't want Joan to know. So that's fine.
But generally it all just kind of serves, rather than doing a dissection as such.
No, it's
it all kind of serves to make sure that
she's... I don't belong here. I'm haunted by this previous wife. He might still love her. The housekeeper loathes me. And I'm actually really unhappy. And even when I watched Honeymoon Cine film of me and my husband, when I mentioned the wrong thing, he switched it off and said he wasn't happy, or said, I don't know if I can be happy and all that sort of thing. So she doesn't know if she's with someone who even loves her. And if he does, is he mentally stable? Because he's furious one minute. There's that scene where she goes down to the sort of the lodge on the sites. And it turns out that that's where Rebecca met Flavel, or Flavel, sorry.
He's called Flavel, actually.
Yeah, I think you're right. And he's furious because he didn't want her to go down there, but he can't explain why, because he's a bit, he's like the boomer generation who can't tell their kids they love them. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. But before that,
would he been? What's the generation before that?
No, he's not the boomer generation. He'd fall into the greatest generation.
He is, because of the wartime.
But it's just funny that their kids were all the same as well. They go.
I can't mention that. No.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
The 60s were British.
And I think so. I think the first key scene to talk about, Becca, is the one with the dress.
Yes, we skirted through most of the film. We're coming towards the end of the film now.
Well, no, this is about an hour and a quarter in, I think.
Oh, the fancy dress ball. Yes, so
the fancy dress ball. Yeah,
I was thinking about the Gossamer. I was like, oh no.
Oh no, the Gossamer one. I'll quickly tell you about that. It's when they go to the West Wing and see they see this is the sort of lesbian undertones, or certainly the obsessive undertones, because she's not only making Joan feel worse by picking up this almost see-through nightie and saying, look, you can see my hand through this, implying imagine what he could have seen Rebecca through it, but also imagine what I could see of Rebecca in it.
I find it amazing that it was made by nuns.
And I used to brush her hair, and I've kept all her clothes, and so that's made everything worse. And then, of course, but she's still playing nice enough that the whole thing with the ball gown. Now, she finds out from correspondence that they used to hold a fancy dress ball every autumn, like November time. And she is desperate to fit in, and she's like, can we hold one? This is the only limitation of casting I found really funny, that he said to her, well, we can, but you're going to have to look at, there's going to be hundreds here, and you're going to have to look after them. This ball's got about 12 people at it. But he agrees to a ball, and it's basically fancy dress. And I think this might be what Becca alludes to, that there's a bit of humour in this. But do you want to talk about that, Becca? The whole dress thing, like what happens, and the bit of humour around the other guests and what they wear.
Yeah, so the idea is basically, also, she's kind of feeling very, very isolated. Interestingly, I did have a fun fact, but I'll mention it now. Hitchcock created this effect especially, so to make her sort of feel kind of very isolated and very alone in this big old house as well. So we'd often use effects like kind of making, putting a fan on to blow her hair, and also having, I think, some of the staff and production crew as well actually not be very nice towards her, which isn't particularly pleasant. But basically sort of creating a almost hostile environment for Joan Fontaine on set, to kind of really get that performance from her. Obviously, she spoke out afterwards, she wasn't obviously like abused by Hitchcock or anything like that, but generally kind of received a little bit of poor treatment, sort of bit berated, but to try and just to kind of really get that performance out of her, definitely, that she was kind of quite isolated and on her own and really kind of out of her depth, unfortunately. The dress scene, obviously, she kind of really wants to show that she really is Mrs. De Winter now, and she really is, in charge of Mandalay, when she's really not, unfortunately, and has this fancy dress ball. Mrs. Danvers, really obviously just sets her up to fail. Says, I've got a good idea. Why don't you take a look at those paintings on the wall? This one was favoured by Max. And it's obviously one that was worn by Rebecca. And I think it's because some of the other characters as well. I mean, there's one come as a knight, there's one come as like an Egyptian dancer.
one's come as like a strong man.
As a strong man, yeah. That's the
it's his brother-in-law.
The Watson character, yeah, it's his brother-in-law, definitely. I think in the book as well, they come off a bit nicer. Listeners, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend reading the book. Obviously, it's a much richer experience. But I'm sure there's an audiobook as well if you're not one for reading. But yeah, do check it out. Definitely. There's a few films as well if you prefer. There's a couple of adaptations as well. I would kind of say, I think in the 97 one, the Beatrice character is obviously is played up a lot more as more of like a companion, sort of like friend and sounding board, really.
She's in a couple more scenes in the remake as well, like when she runs back to her room after the dress, which we're going to talk about.
In the 2020 remake.
Keeley Hawes.
Oh, nice. Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. No, she'd be really. Yeah, I can see her as Beatrice. Actually, she'd be pretty good as that. But yeah, certainly in this 1940 adaptation, they're very much kind of like minor roles. And Nigel Bruce, that's his name. He's a strongman character. He's Dr. Watson in the Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes films, so I highly recommend those as well. But yeah, so I think there's a little bit of humour, especially with like the costumes as well, and also generally the awkwardness surrounding Joan Fontaine character. But obviously, yeah, so she's kind of, it just shows like how impressionable she is as well. So like she's shown the sort of interest that she has, called mainly sketching, drawing, things like that. So obviously she sketches all these different designs, like there's a knight in shining armour design, there's lots of different dress designs that she wears for this costume that she's going to make for a fancy dress ball. And in the end, she's completely led by Miss Danvers saying, why don't you pick this one that was favoured by Max? And it turned out to be one that
Becca wore the previous year, just before she died.
Wore, literally, and it was obviously hugely inappropriate. And just the whole shame and embarrassment.
Well, it was right around the time of her death, but also
it was, yeah,
about the affairs and stuff. He, as we find out later,
he's not impressed.
Hated her by this point anyway. His first wife.
No, exactly.
So I think she sort of runs back to her room here, and then she goes to see Danvers to say, like, why did you do that to me? And we'll come to that scene in a minute. Very quickly on the remakes. I don't have to talk about it too much later. The other bit on the casting.
No, I'm looking forward to talking about the others actually.
On the remake, Keeley Hawes follows her to her room and talks to her. So when
Dave says the remake, obviously there have been lots of different remakes and adaptations, but when
the 2020 Netflix one with Armie Hammer and all
the 2020 Netflix adaptation.
When I say the remake, I'm just being consistent on my terminology with what I was saying earlier. So
yeah, but bear in mind there have been others.
Yeah, of course, but Keeley Hawes does go back and talk to her, which speaks to the companionship thing you were sort of on about. But obviously, in this version of the film, the dress has caused all this issue. She's run back to it. She's had a word with Danvers.
It's the fact that she's been kind of.
And So yeah, we'll get some words from Chris now, because he's just said he's been off on father duties. I hope he means looking after the kid and not like conceiving another one. Because
I was going to say how's the little one, but I won't perhaps say that now.
A, we don't know if it's little, and B, I'd have stayed away another 20 minutes or so to look good.
Anyway, how are you, Chris? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. What were we talking about? Sorry.
We are at the point in the film where she wears the dress that Rebecca had worn the previous year to the sort of costume ball. So we're coming towards the final act of the film. Obviously, she goes to Miss Danvers at this point, and Miss Danvers is kind of taunting her to like jump to her death. Kristen Scott Thomas, if anything, I'm not saying it's a better performance, but she's actually almost sounds slightly more fucking unhinged in this. She doesn't play it big, but she just plays it so out of touch with reality.
That sounds amazing. I got to see this.
It's not a great film. I can't say it's a great film, but I've seen complimentary scenes quite within like 2 hours, because I literally finished one and put on the other one, and I think this one is just a little bit more unsettling, because you've got this gaping open window in the dark, and it's not quite as darkly lit in the remake, in the 2020 version. She's basically taunting her to jump, and the only that you never matched up to her. In other words, it's her who can't get over the first wife. It turns out she came to Mandalay with Rebecca. She was Rebecca's assistant anyway, possibly a lover. That's never really confirmed. I don't think the film is that interested in that, but she's certainly on her.
No, I don't think that the film is, but it's definitely there. But I think it's something that's come on since, hasn't it? Obviously, it was kind of a little bit strung up by the code as to what it could have been.
It doesn't really,
but it's kind of there. But obviously, knowing that she was gay herself as well, I think adds an extra layer, whether you like it or not. So.
No, she can't have been, I've just been looking at Wikipedia, and she was married twice. So I mean, she can't have been gay. I mean, think Michael Barrymore wasn't. He was married.
Tony Perkins, he was married.
Tony Perkins, he was married. Yeah. So yeah. I think you're barking up the wrong tree there, Becca.
Jeremy Brett, maybe I don't know about him. No. Well, I don't actually know about him, even though he was actually married to Anna Massey. But I don't actually know about him.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah.
There were several, but no. There was. There's definitely. Her life is only changed by the shipwreck.
I must admit, though, it is a little bit. I do find that scene quite. If I got one criticism, I do find that scene quite jarring. Like, all of a sudden, like she's like, "Oh, look how easy it would be," and like they are so close together. I'll be like, "Get out my face," I'd be like, "Excuse me, love," but I just do kind of think like it's quite a jarring to me. Actually, it's quite a jarring scene. Like it reaches ahead a bit too quickly. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. The pacing of the film's not bad, but the transition to that is quite abrupt, and the transition to we're in the final act.
Why, because it is so shocking, and because she's quite a menacing character. But I do totally get that. But just to me, it just comes off a little bit like, oh, okay. But I totally see why. Where that has to be and how Hitchcock does that and how he kind of creates that tension. But I just got a little bit like, back off, a little bit. And it's very claustrophobic. It's very tight.
You don't have to get her to jump tonight. I know you want to end the film now, but this takes us into the final act.
Get on with it.
Rebecca died. Nobody.
Spoiler alert.
Rebecca had died, and obviously, from what we'd been told, Maxim identified her body. She'd sort of slipped and fallen from a cliff, and she was buried, and that was it. And it turns out that, we got the shipwreck first, but effectively they end up at the lodge with him explaining to her that we met in Monte Carlo, or we married him, and we honeymooned in Monte Carlo, where you and I met. And within 3 or 4 days of the wedding, she was telling me that she would keep up the side of the bargain of looking like my wife, but she wanted all the lovers she wanted. She had an apartment in London. I didn't want her to bring men here, but over time she got careless and started doing so. And the body in that grave is not her. And it's the one bit in the 2020 version that's slightly more haunting, that when she realizes, when he says that, you really do think for a moment she's in the room with a murderer. And I don't think I ever thought that in this version. I think he is coming clean with her about, it's not quite what you think.
I've always thought from the start about his performance didn't strike me as he is a murderer. Do you know what I mean? Even from a a twist point of view, it would
No,
still
he just seems a bit put upon. And in fact, even for everything we've said about Armie Hammer, he's not that good in light and shade either. So when he does turn up to be a murderer, it's kind of jarring the other way. But
because his performance is so poor.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say he was poor actually. He doesn't have the light and shade that he's got here.
But yeah, no. but in this film, I think particularly it does make sense. It's like, yeah, he's got his own trauma. You know, he was in a traumatic relationship, and he actually just wanted to heal, and he's not really sure who to love and who to trust. No. Again, in the other version I saw, there was a bit where she actually Flavel takes her on a horse. And
really?
It's only a short sequence in the film, and
I'm joking, don't worry.
But he's absolutely furious when he finds out about that. But he says really outrageous things about her, like cheating on him and stuff like that, which isn't quite in this version. But this is where she basically just all naivety goes, and it turns out that she did fall and strike her head during an argument. It was the argument where she said that not only was she pregnant, but there was no way of proving that it wasn't his, and it isn't his, it's Favel's. And when she died, he panicked, didn't know what to do, and he took the body out on a boat, which he then sort of scuttled so it would sink. And then another body washed ashore, and he identified that as hers. And that's the full story he tells. So it's now, Flavel tries to sort of blackmail him effectively. But there has to be an inquest, whether this is suicide or not. And it's basically, well, he's got a letter sort of saying, Jack's got this letter saying, well, she's coming to see me and she's got some news and it's all hopeful. So how's that somebody who's just committed suicide? And their only way of sorting this out is if they can find that doctor. She had a doctor in London. And that she claims that only Rebecca, Maxim, and now Joan know about this. So that sort of sets up the very end of the film.
Yeah, it's a bit of a kind of sort of reveal, isn't it? It's almost kind of a little bit like, with this 97 remake as well, I kind of thought that it sort of descends into, you know, this sort of Agatha Christie kind of style reveals where they assemble all the suspects into one room, and then Poirot will say it was you, or, you know, he'll discount them one by one. Yeah. I kind of feel like it does dissolve into that a little bit, and obviously in the book it's kind of revealed that obviously that she wasn't only pregnant but she was ill as well.
How did they? No, she wasn't pregnant at all. That's the point. She took the symptoms for pregnancy.
No, exactly, that's it. Yeah, and that's because all the, you know, basically for us, basically, you know, she was pregnant and they are obviously going to have, you know, and obviously going to have a baby, and they would be able to prove that it's not Maxim, basically. But obviously, I think in other editions as well, going the fact that maybe she was actually dying.
I don't know how they did it.
In the book as well. Mrs. Danvers goes on about the fact that obviously the only thing that kind of really scared her was obviously like a slow lingering death, and I think that was kind of why I think that's probably why in the 1940 film they kind of had to do it obviously to get around the Hays Code. That's why they had to kind of do it as an accident as well, because you couldn't have any involvement from the church as well. And also you couldn't have it'd basically be a stain on Laurence Olivier's image.
There's different plot points around that. So in this version,
there are. I think I haven't seen the new one, but I think in the remake, in the 19, I haven't got that far in the 79 one. I'm not quite sure yet. But in the 97 one, they also say that obviously it's not the fact that she was actually pregnant, but that she had cancer. And so it was scuttled obviously because she didn't want to. She didn't want to. I'm getting at.
Right.
No. But I was just saying that's the sort of differences between all the different versions.
So no, what I'm getting at is in the two different versions, and I've just got myself confused there a couple of minutes ago, because in this film she doesn't know she's dying of cancer. All right, she thinks she's.
Oh yeah, this film she doesn't know at all. No.
She comes to tell her lover. Right, a heated argument happens. She goads him over the fact that not only is she's going to take his name and his estate and basically pass it on to another man's child. They argue, she dies. So a doctor, when they do the inquest, investigates and says no, she was terminally ill anyway, and they carry on with the suicide verdict. In the 2020 version, she knows she's got cancer, and she's basically goes down to taunt him about a pregnancy, even though it's not. and goads him into shooting her, and then hopefully. And so the cancer is not known about by a local doctor on an autopsy. It's diagnosed by her private doctor in London, which they then have to find. Lily James manages to find.
Yeah, that's why she doesn't know about it.
All right. So she does know about it there, but proving it requires them to go to London and do some things around it there. She taunts him to kill her. And they actually say, well, it's been out at sea, it'll be bloated, they're not going to be able to find anything from an autopsy here. But of course, yeah. So they knew they know about it in the book, they know about it in some of the later versions, and they don't. She doesn't.
It's a bit similar. It's a bit similar in the book as well, but it does kind of like descend into sort of Agatha Christie style, like whodunit reveal. But they have to sort of find the letter and then find obviously this doctor. But the fact that it's been hidden from even somebody like Mr. Danvers, for example, and I think that's what kind of pushes her over the edge a little bit. Whereas obviously in the film, that's not even mentioned at all. It's all just kind of, it was an accident, and it's all kind of very nicely tied up in a nice little ribbon. Whereas obviously in the two other different versions, and obviously in the 2020 version, they can push the envelope a bit more. They have got breathing room. They can be more faithful.
I mean, if someone can tell me she did know she had cancer, because I've only seen it once, please correct me. I'm open to conversation on it, because the argument would still stand. She was trying to goad him into killing her, to ruin him. Well, why would she want that unless she was terminally ill? And yet the film points at she didn't know.
Exactly. I think in the book, obviously, it kind of goes into a bit more detail there. But obviously in this film version, it's not mentioned, is it? I don't think. No, exactly.
No. So anyway, he's now free. They drive home to sort of properly restart their married life, and the mansion's on fire, and Danvers stays inside and calmly waits for the roof to collapse in on to kill her. Yeah. Again, in the other version I saw, she did set it on fire, but then she went to the cliff edge, had one final scene with Lily James, who's out trying to ask her not to do it, and she said, well, I was never going to let you have Mandalay. You took the only thing important to me, but this is my gift to you. And she, I'm giving you your freedom, and she jumps to her own death then. And that's the difference. Yeah. And that's it for me. I'm not going to say much for final thoughts, because I've done this. I don't know. How does she die in the book, Danvers? Do you remember?
She's consumed by the flames.
All right, so as per the film. So, okay. Final thoughts from me. I've nothing more to add than this is the best I've seen so far, and it's the first purely, without doubt, without caveat, really good one. I've really, really enjoyed this. That's it from me. Chris?
I'm good, I'm glad.
Apologies, I was absent for a significant chunk then. But, I agree with Dave. This is probably the best one so far as a film. It's very atmospheric, great performances, a lot of things to talk about as well. I think, Becca.
All right. Oh God. Okay. Sorry, 2 seconds.
Also, my first George Sanders film I've seen. So that was a.
Yeah, I've seen him in so many things. He didn't live to a great age. He pops up in all
these kind of 40s movies, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. You'll even if you don't think you know him. And he was the voice of Shere Khan in the Jungle Book.
Yeah.
That's where I know him from. Not
including that, of course, but yeah.
Married to 2 of the Gabor sisters at different times.
He was a bit of a dog, wasn't he? He got around.
He's a boy, wasn't he? I'm trying to think I'm trying to think what film. I'm looking now to see what film I know him best from. He'll have been in several I've seen, but there'll be 1 or 2 where I go, it must be that I'm thinking of first.
All About Eve. That's quite a.
I've seen all these, but it won't be that. I've seen him in loads of stuff, but I'm trying to think what. Anyway, carry on. Final thoughts, Becca, from you, and wherever you want to take us next while I look this guy up.
Yeah, well, we look at George Sanders. Yeah, only because I know him from Shere Khan. That's pretty much it, unfortunately. I had a good time with this one. I think I probably prefer some of the adaptations rather than this film. But no, it's really good. Yeah, I love the gothic aspects of it. It's a really interesting story as well, but I think it's one of those ones where you've got like a more interesting story going on behind the scenes as well, sort of a battle between Hitchcock and Selznick trying to gain supremacy on this one. But again, ultimately, it is still a snake picture with Hitchcock elements, as we had with Jamaica and with Charles Lawton. Just Hitchcock playing referee, really. But I love like some of the techniques that he uses. Some of that stuff, obviously, he does the sort of Jane Fontaine largely don't agree with. But I think some of the techniques and everything that he uses to kind of really get that performance, I think does really, really well. I mean, there's like aspects of comedy of it to it as well. Laurence Olivier is quite dashing as a kind of almost tortured hero, almost. Probably much too like the, rather than shade. Judy Denson is terrifying, Mrs. Danvers. She's kind of like one of the. She's the template. You know, if ever you kind of do it, that she's the template on which you base it, basically. And no one can really do it much like her. With this movie, definitely. But yeah, I think it was interesting to see all the different adaptations of it as well. I'm keen to check out the 2020 adaptation. I'll just skip over the Armie Hammer being cancelled part. I think of the other two in betweeny ones, I think I probably prefer the 79 one a little bit more. As it's a bit more faithful to the book, obviously. But obviously, it's a different adaptation. I think there's also been a Italian or Spanish adaptation as well. It's a very famous book, been adapted for probably the screen, for radio, many different times.
Gen Z version, Bex.
Yeah, there probably will be. There'll probably be a Gen Z version.
Bex with the Z.
No cap. It hits different.
Hey, quickly, I'll answer the question. A shot in the dark, Chris.
There we go. There it is.
Go on.
Well, that answered that question. I'm glad we all enjoyed it, and had a good time. So yay.
Teach us more about it. Teach us more.
I've got a long list. I probably won't go through the tropes because we haven't really got very many.
No, it's all right. Just give us a few.
Yeah, we haven't really got very many here, but they will be coming soon. So watch out. Things to look out for: notable scenes, obviously, as we said. Things we've seen again in Vertigo, obsessing over the ghost of a previous love. Plus, the ghost of Rebecca also influences with Space and Psycho, obviously, as we know. We'll go on a bit more about the Don't Trust Your Husbands, Michael. When we get to the suspicion in a couple of films' time.
I'm looking forward to that.
Two characters from Hitchcock films appear on the AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains list. Two villains appear, Norman Bates at number 2, and Mrs. Danvers all the way down at number 31. Which I think is quite interesting, considering they're obviously male and female. So, I'd reverse those if it was me, but never mind. So as we talked about, Becca has had several adaptations. 1979 starring Jeremy Brett, Joanna David, Emilia Fox's mum, and Anna Massey. Another Powell and Pressburger connection, as also starred as Moonlight. And also, kids who grew up in the 90s will remember Demon Headmaster, Terence Hardiman, who passed away a while ago. He's also in this adaptation. This was apparently du Maurier's favourite, as it was closer to the novel. Mandalay was apparently based on, is it Carhays Castle? On the South Cornish coast, halfway between Truro and St Austell, not far from where du Maurier lived. And another adaptation, which can also be found on YouTube as two-parter, I think with music by Ron Grainer, but it's largely Debussy, so I think he probably just arranged it. But yeah, 1997 TV adaptation starring Emilia Fox, and her mum played the same role. And I think it was like a second on-screen role, so a very early role for Emilia Fox there. Starring Charles Dance as Maxim, and Diana Rigg as Mrs. Danvers. So you've got two Bond connections there, which is pretty cool, I think. But also starring Tom Chapon, Jonathan Cake, it's got an amazing name, Geraldine James, Dennis Lill, and Ian McDavid. So Star Wars collection
Dennis
as well.
Lill.
Dennis Lill, I know.
Rodney Trotter's father-in-law.
Yes, so Only Fools and Horses connection as well, randomly. This was 97, so.
Who's married to Benedict Cumberbatch's mum in that show, who's also played Sherlock.
Oh God, yes, I forgot they were married in that programme.
It all comes back to Arthur Conan Doyle. This
is it. But she was also in Space 1999 or UFO she was in. So Jerry Anderson connection as well. This adaptation also features Timothy West and Faye Dunaway as Mrs. Van Hopper, so she was fabulous. It's a faithful adaptation, but it kind of, to me, they cut it with Jonathan Cake's OTT performance as Ravel, it's worth a watch just for that alone. And also, the cars in that adaptation were provided by Prince Rainier of Monaco, which is amazing. I think that's fantastic.
We're going with Monaco, are we?
Monaco.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, because obviously that's how, like, Diana Rigg, she's in it. And in Majesty's, she's like, in Monaco, that's how she says. That's why I'm saying.
I know she does.
It's Monaco, basically.
I get the reference.
But I thought it was quite funny how, like, because it always makes me laugh because she's very posh. And it's like Monaco. It's like, no, it's Monaco. It's like,
she's just seen it written down, didn't she? Yeah.
Run like the wind. Run like the wind. So the other adaptation was 2020 Netflix one starring Armie Hammer, Lily James, Krista Scott Thomas, directed by Ben Wheatley. I kind of feel it's overshadowed a little bit by Hammer being cancelled. So fun fact number 3, I don't know what number it is. John Fontaine won the role of an unnamed Mrs. De Winton number 2, channeling kind of like really meekness and being out of place, and wanted to fit in by having the sort of cast and crew be not very nice to her, which is a bit horrible. But actually, there's a whole other raft of other actresses for the role. So like Olivia de Havilland, I think, auditioned. I'll post a link on our Twitter feed. There's a really good video. It's a little bit blurry, but lots of different actresses screen test for the role as well. And that kind of really serves just to show how good Jane Fontaine actually really was. I think at the time, Laurence Olivier was who was he going out with at the time?
This time it would have been Vivian Lee.
Yeah, so he really wanted her for the role. I think she screen tests, and he was a bit put out by her not getting the role. Because she was obviously really pushing for her to get the role, but unfortunately she didn't. But fortunately for us, we got the fantastic Jane Fontaine instead. Interesting as well. This is from obviously Nova Pilbeam passed away recently. This is from her obituary in the Guardian. Among the many might have beens in film history was that Pilbeam nearly starred opposite Laurence Olivier in Rebecca. Hitchcock's first US producer Selznick desperately wanted her for the role. I
remember speaking very highly of her as well, didn't I? I think I seemed to like her.
Yes, you enjoyed her position.
I think I liked her performance, yeah.
Yeah, she's quite good in it, definitely. Wanted to offer her a 5-year contract. Pilbeam was also hoping to land the role, as she recently lost out to Margaret Lockwood in Lady Vanishes around that time, 1939, 1940. Which again was great shame, but Lockwood was fabulous, so it was all right. However, after auditioning many others for the role, as I just mentioned, including Olivia de Havilland, and who was the female lead in The Bishop's Wife? I can't remember her name, but she was wonderful in that as well. But they actually opted for 22-year-old Jane Fontaine, arguing that at 20, was 2 years younger, Pilbeam was not yet mature enough for the role of second Mrs. De Winter.
It's a balancing act, and they've got it right, though.
Well, it is, yeah. I think if he had somebody like Olivia de Havilland or Vivian Lee, they're both incredibly talented actresses, but I think the fame sort of eclipsed them a little bit. You're very much like a name playing that role. Not that Jane Fontaine was like a complete unknown, but she was still quite young, and she did that innocence really well. Unfortunately, that is all the facts I have. They're not that fun. Sorry about that.
I found them fun, and I think
our listeners will be the judge of that.
I know, and I think that's plenty for tonight. Anyway, as for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
And you find me at Cinematronics on Twitter. You can also find all the old episodes on Podbean and wherever your listening devices will collect podcasts.
Yeah, on your podcatcher of choice, wherever you listen to us, don't forget to rate, review, to like and share. You can find us on Facebook, Do You Expect Us to Talk? You can find us on X, Twitter, at Expect Us to Talk. You can find us on YouTube, and Do You Expect Us to Talk? Yeah, we're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, basically wherever you listen to us from, definitely. As well, expecttotalk@gmail.com. Please interact with us. Like I was doing Hitchcock at the moment, if there's a series or film or franchise you want us to cover, get in touch. We'll certainly consider it. We'll add it to our ever-growing list.
Thanks, folks, for a short, informal but informative show.
Yes, they got.
Super.
Tell me one.
Okay. All right, then. So, we go again next week with Becca.
do expect to talk will return with the foray into spy thriller with a foreign correspondent.